the other day that there are several tools in my toolbox that probably aren't common to everybody. And if you're a beginning home mechanic or car restorer, motorcycle guy, here's some things that you might want to add to your toolbox that maybe wouldn't come across right away as something that you should have beyond your basic wrenches and screwdrivers and that sort of thing. So I'm going to go over a few of these things, give you a brief synopsis on everything. If you're a car guy, you're going to need some of these, then you're not going to need them for motorcycles necessarily. First and foremost, if you're working on anything modern, you got to have an OBD2 reader. These things are really inexpensive now. You can pick them up anywhere. I got this one on Amazon with the very strange name of Big Banana. Don't ask me why. And it works great for pulling codes, clearing codes, that sort of thing. I don't really need one that's fancier than that. I don't try to program stuff. All I need to do is pull the codes and reset things, and this will work for most of your engine functions. It will not work for airbag SRS systems, though. The other electrical device you ought to have at the minimum is one of these test lights. You can use these to find continuity, check for power, that sort of thing. I've used one of these for years before I ever bought a multimeter and managed to survive. If you can get one with alligator clips on the ends, even better. They're only a few dollars. You can get them pretty much anywhere. Now, here's a very important tool. This is a magnetic retrieval tool. This one you can actually pull out to probably a good 2 feet of length. And it's great for finding those pesky 10mm sockets that have gone missing, or other bolts and screws that you drop down into the nether regions of a vehicle and can never find again. If you don't have one of these, man, you got to get one. This is one of the most used tools, I think, anything of my toolbox next to the wrenches and ratchets. Also, pick up a set of these pry bars. You usually can get these in sets of 3 or 4 from Harbor Freight or pretty much any cheap tool vendor. And these don't have to be super high dollar. I've been using these Harbor Freight ones for probably 20 years, and they're just indispensable. This is the longest one I have. And you'll be surprised how often you use it once you do have it. It's way better than using a screwdriver. Now this one doesn't seem remarkable at first. It's just an extension for a 3/8 drive. But you can see how long it is. This thing has bailed me out of a lot of problems. I wound up buying this originally to do starter removals on Fiat 124s. This, coupled with 2 or 3 universal joints and some more extensions, it's about the only way you can get one out because of the shape of the bell housing and the placement of the starter bolts. But I've used this thing for, all kinds of stuff since then. Again, not an expensive tool. This is a Craftsman version. Probably for as much as you use it, you don't need a really expensive one. Now this thing is an expandable hood prop. And most of the cars have hood prop rods and, that sort of thing. Sometimes if you work on a car with weak hood struts or bad springs, you'll need one of these. This comes in handy for other things though, and the main thing I've used it for is to depress a brake pedal. You can put the one end on the brake and the other end stick it against the seat or the steering wheel to keep brake pressure on. That's great for finding problems with brake lights and other functions like that. I've used it probably more for that than I have to actually prop open hoods and trunk lids. This is my most recent purchase. This is a hose clamp plier. This is used for those strap clamps on radiator and smaller hoses and intake hoses and all kinds of things like that where they don't have a threaded clamp. This thing is a lifesaver. It's way better than using a pair of needle nose pliers or something and trying to squeeze it. This thing will actually grab and hold the clamp properly, and it has a ratchet function and a release lever, so it'll hold the clamp tight for you once you squeeze it together. This was a great purchase, and I use this thing all the time now, especially working on the more modern cars. I picked up this little guy once for a job, and I've used it quite a bit since. It's awkward as the dickens to use, but if you've got a screw in a place that you really can't get to, this is a lot of times the only way it's going to happen. It's only a few dollars to buy one, and it's a great thing to have in the toolbox. It is difficult to keep pressure on the screw head when you're trying to lever it from the other end. But with patience, you can get the job done. And I've been able to remove things, remove screws without having to take off complete other sub-assemblies just by having this. Now this is a slightly more advanced set that you may or may not want to buy, but having it and having used it, it's come in really handy. This is a impact driver for screws. And this is the impact unit. You put your bits in these guys here and put it on the end, and basically you insert it into a screw, and on the other end you whack it with a hammer while holding it like this. And what it'll do is it breaks screws loose that are otherwise sticky. And if you've ever stripped out a Phillips head screw, you know how aggravating that can be. And this will really prevent that on a lot of cases. I use this whenever I get one that's just a little bit recalcitrant, and just give it a good hard strike or two, and it usually breaks them loose and they come out really easy. This one was a little expensive because it's a name brand tool company, but you can buy these cheaper, and for as much as you use them, you probably don't need a super duper brand. This little guy is a battery clamp removal tool, and it's used to pull battery clamps, top post battery clamps that are stuck on there. I've used it for other things too. And one thing I've used it for that it's been really good at is on some cars, wiper blades stick to the shaft and there's no real way to get under them and pry them off. This thing has popped them off perfectly for me when they get corroded together without doing any damage to them. So then again, a very cheap tool. I don't use it a lot, but when you need it, it's a lifesaver. I wanted to talk briefly about wrenches too. I started off with my tool collection was all Craftsman wrenches, and they've served me well. Later on, I wound up buying a set of these. These are a brand called Wright. I think they're made in England. And I bought these, I think, on Grit's Garage or someplace years ago. But the difference between them is notable. You notice on the Craftsman, it's got these raised areas where it has the size and the brand name and all that. And the edges are all